Today on episode 30 of the Play Guitar podcast, I talk about how to get the most out of the most basic gig setup, the single amp with pedals. Also, I've got some listener feedback, so stay tuned. Welcome to episode 30 of the Play Guitar podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that'll help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today. It's another milestone for the show. Episode 30, I've done 30 of these. I'm so excited to hit this one, and it's been a great ride. We've been tackling issues like music theory and playing fast and, notes on the fretboard and gear. A lot of fun stuff. So I wanted to just take a few seconds and thank everyone who's been listening, maybe from the beginning or just for a while. And I'd also really like to give a really nice welcome to all of the new listeners we've been getting in the last few weeks. Amplifier Setup is a question I get a lot. A lot of people get their amplifier. They don't know what to do, how to set it up. A lot of people start off with these small practice amps that have modeling in it, which is another hurdle that people have to go learn about. And then some people just go direct with the modelers, the floorboards, and even the rack mounts. But eventually everyone, the amplifiers are pretty straightforward. You get to know what they are, especially around the house for practicing. But the problem starts when you're ready to start playing in front of people, when you're ready to get to the gig. Like I said, the modelers are getting better. You have so many options. And you can get so many different sounds, and you're naturally wanting from song to song to make it sound as much like the song as you can. But you find out pretty quick it's tough to get them to sound right with a band. With all of the options of different tones that you have, it's tough to find one that really sits well and cuts through and is your own sound. But sometimes Old Faithful can come to your rescue. And what's Old Faithful? Well, that's the single amp with a few pedals. It's easy and it works. You see a lot of players who were famous in the 80s and the 90s. They talk about they used to have these enormous amounts of rack-mounted gear, and they would have the roadies hauling them everywhere, and it was tough to set up and make changes on the fly. And they all talked about how going to a simpler setup made them feel free. Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, these are the people that come to mind right now. But they just kind of moved to a simpler setup. The amplifier with a few pedals in front of it, some stomp boxes. I know how frustrating that can be and how liberating it is once you kind of ditch all that rack mounted stuff that we used to use a whole lot. So today we're going through a bit of the same. Most players start off with some sort of modeling. You get a small practice amp and it's got, 10 different amps or so in there, and you get used to how each one sounds. Or you start off with just a floorboard and plug into headphones, however you do it. But when you make that transition to playing out, you find yourself with those challenges. Like I said before, it's not cutting through. And sometimes it's hard to hear yourself if you have a poor monitoring setup. And another problem people are having is when you're playing with the band, getting the levels between the patches correct. And that's tough. And it takes a lot of time going into menus and all those kind of things. But understanding how to set up this basic 1 amp setup, it could be just what you need. So I'm going to be talking about that today. But before we get started today, I want to remind you about my free video lesson. It's called Get Your Blues Soloing Under Control. It's the 6 steps I found that will help you have the right foundations for playing killer blues solos in no time at all. It's a lesson I put together for you guys after spending some time with a few of you, and I know it can really help take your soloing in a new direction. It's really easy to get to. Just head over to freeblueslesson.com. When you sign up for this, you'll get news about all of my podcasts and videos and other cool stuff. It's all sent straight to your email inbox. So go ahead and check that out at freeblueslesson.com. Okay, so thanks again for joining me today. We're going to go ahead and get started about talking about single amp with pedals. The basic gig setup, a single amp with some pedals in front. Getting your amp and guitar pedals to play together, it's very exciting. And you can experiment with all of the different combinations to get different tones. It's a lot of fun. And you can just do that over and over again. You can actually spend most of your time just finding different combinations and having a good time. But at some point, you've got to make a decision. What's going to be my sound? What's going to be that sound that makes your heart happy? The sound that associates, who you are, how you want others to perceive your guitar playing, what you want others to hear. There's many different ways to go with an amplifier setup. There's what we're going to talk about today, which is a single amp. You can go with a 2-amp setup. You have a dirty amp and a clean amp. You could do a stereo setup, or you could go direct just with a modeling pedal, or you could have like a super expensive multiple amp setup with routing and all sorts of, it just gets crazy. But today I'm focusing on this basic single amp with few pedal setup. It's the most basic that can cut any gig. You have one guitar, a few pedals, and one amp. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's easy to figure out if you get flustered. When you're playing in front of people, lots of things are going on and you're trying to focus on what you're doing. And if your guitar's not sounding right, well, you either reach back and adjust your amp or reach down on the floor and adjust your pedals and you're good to go. As I talked about a little bit before, a lot of people back in the day, they used to have the rack setups. I had one too. I had an ADA, I think it was an MP1 preamp, and I used that. I had a multi-effects rack as well. Then that went into a power amp. I had a MIDI switching pedal to switch all of the different racks, and they all went to a speaker cabinet. I was constantly adjusting levels, getting into different menus. We'd be playing a song. It sounded great on one song, and then when we moved on to the next one, I was lost in the mix again. So I'd have to go back and change some parameters, and it was tough. So I finally got fed up. And I just got a regular old amp, just a clean amp, and I added a drive pedal to it. I think it was a Tube Screamer. I'm pretty sure it was. I still use that. I have that same Tube Screamer. And I got the amp level right. When I hit the drive pedal, it boosted the level just a little bit so I could go up over the band, the sound of the band, and I started relaxing and I started smiling. The changes I made were immediate and they were easy. All it was just a core tone, and then I used the pedals to change it when I need it. Well, after that, I haven't looked back. Let's talk about it. It wasn't a fancy setup. I think I know it was a Fender Hot Rod DeVille 212, not the 412 one, because that was too heavy. But I got the 212 one, which I still think is an awesome amp. You just need to know how to use it. They were out for years. Everyone had them. They were on a lot of backlines and for different stages. But the trick to using the Hot Rod DeVille is it has three. It has a clean, it has kind of a mid sound, an overdrive sound, which I think was yellow, and then it has the drive sound, which was red. And the problem was the clean sound sounded great. It was Fender clean. And the middle sound, I think it was yellow, was not that great. It was an overdrive kind of sound. It kind of was flubby. It didn't really sound very well. And then the red channel, the high gain, the drive channel, It didn't sound that great either when you cranked it all the way up. It just didn't have, it didn't have a great lead sound. But the trick was, this is what, from owning one myself and experimenting with it, is I would use the red channel, the high drive channel, but I would turn the distortion way down. I'd only put enough of it in so it sounded like kind of a dirty amp, a little bit of gain to it. And that was the sound. It sounded awesome. The red channel, so you have your clean channel, then you clicked over to the red channel and it had a little bit of gain to it. So you got your nice dirty rhythm sound. And all I did was from there, if I wanted to go with a lead sound, I'd boost it with a tube screamer or a blues driver. They both worked great for it. It sounded awesome, and it was light years better than my rack setup, and it was so easy to change things on the fly. And I always had people ask me, how did you get that amp to sound that way? So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So today, in memory of that setup that set me free, we're going to talk about how to get a nice, easy, basic, giggable amp setup. I touched on this before. Getting your amp set up the correct way and which way to go can be very confusing. If you add multiple amps, you go stereo, you have a wet dry, or you have lots of different pedals with different routings on the pedals, it can be overwhelming. And that might be necessary for your situation, but I found that the simpler is the better. Especially if you're in a new situation, you're dealing with new people, and you just want something that works and requires very little thought. And it'll be different depending on what your situation, what you need. You might be just jamming with some friends, one setup. You might be playing a small venue, another setup, a medium-sized venue, another one, a large venue, another one, or an outdoor venue. It has a whole different set of challenges. But having this basic core tone, something that sounds good, even if you're just going straight into the amp, kind of like Angus Young from AC/DC, or just having an overdrive pedal before the amp. That's your basic core tone. Today, I'm not going to worry about choruses and delays and stunt effects and just cool stuff like that. We're talking about your core tone. So let's make our decisions. What do you need to play a gig? What are the basic sounds that you need to go through your songs? If we boil it all down, there's three that you need. You need a clean sound, you need a dirty rhythm sound, and you need a lead sound. That's kind of the basic three that you want to think about. So we're going to try and find a bass tone, something that you can set your amplifier one way and forget it. It could be one of those. It could be a clean sound. It could be you set your amp dirty, or you set your amp just screaming lead. But one of those tones that you need will be just the way your amp is. And what we're going to do is use that as a canvas from which to create all of the other different tones that we need. And then we'll make changes to that tone, whether it's from stomp boxes or just from your guitar controls, to get all of the other sounds that we need. And you can decide what that core tone needs to be. And we're going to go through three scenarios, three basic ways to go with that. The first is using it as just a clean amp. And what settings would you use? So that's pretty easy. You just basically get your amp to sound with a clean tone that you like. You set the volume that you would want your clean sound to be. That would sound good when you're playing clean on your songs. What you have to do the most is watch the bass control, especially depending on the volume. You might have your amp sound great at home or at a certain place, and then the next place you have to crank up a little bit more. You might have to lower your bass down, because that bass, the higher volume your amplifiers get, the more muddy the bass gets. So the higher it gets, the lower that bass goes down. So it still kind of cuts through and doesn't get muddy. But everything else, other than watching the bass and the volume, is just how you want it, how you want your clean sound to be. And where will we go from there? We need to get we've got the clean, straight from the amp. We need to get our crunch sound and our lead sound. How will we get that? Well, we're going to do that with pedals. To get the dirty rhythm sound, that kind of crunch sound, we could use like a tube screamer or an overdrive pedal, something that doesn't have a lot of gain on it. And what we'll do is we'll set that to sound the way we like, but we'll actually push the amp with it a little bit. We'll raise the output on that pedal so it pushes the front of the amp and raises your volume. Because when you're playing a song with a dirty rhythm, usually the drummer gets a little bit louder, the rest of the band gets louder, and you're going to need a little bit of extra volume. Well, you can set that on the pedal. You push that clean sound with that pedal, the volume goes up, and all you got to do is stomp on the pedal and you're good to go. Well, where do we go for our lead sound? Some people like the stack pedals. They might use another overdrive pedal in front of that one, and that will give you more sustain and even a little bit more volume. Some people use boost pedals for that too. They might put a boost pedal in front of your drive pedal and to raise the volume a little bit more to give a little sustain. It's easy. Okay, here, let me give you an example of that. So here will be our clean amp. Nice clean sound. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to get some sort of a drive pedal. I'm using a BB preamp right now. Here, I'll kick that in. There's my dirty rhythm sound. Now you hear that the volume came up a little bit. I have it set so that the output is a little bit higher than the clean sound. Here's clean. There's dirty rhythm right there. A little bit louder. But what if I really needed to go for it? I needed something to push it over the top. I'm going to use a tube screamer first. We'll hear what that sounds. In front of, which means the guitar's going into the tube screamer before it goes into my rhythm pedal, which is the BB preamp. So here's dirty rhythm now with the tube screamer. Added a little bit more volume, a little bit more sustain. And it has that tube, kind of a tube screamery type sound, for lack of a better word. But what if you wanted something that wasn't quite as colored as that? You could use a boost pedal. This is an EP booster. So this will be going EP booster before the BB preamp. So here's a BB preamp. Now that's added it's pushed it. It sounds more natural. So I got those three sounds from a clean amp with two pedals. And we started as the bass tone as a clean amp. So what are the advantages of that? Well, one, it's easy. You just set the levels and go. You can adjust them on the fly. So if you're up there and your lead sound's not right, crank that boost pedal a little bit more. You're good to go. You don't have to worry too much. What are the disadvantages of this? Well, we're going to start talking about something called headroom. When you run a clean amp, headroom is the biggest issue. Not every amplifier is the same. And headroom is how much you can push your amp before it just can't take anymore. Because we're pushing the amp, meaning we're getting a lot of extra volume from these pedals. Some amplifiers, like a Fender Twin, it can take a lot. You can really push a lot of volume into the amp before it starts to distort it, and it starts to break up and doesn't sound very nice. If you like to have a crystal clear, clean tone, you're going to need an amp with a whole lot of headroom. But if your amplifier doesn't, if you notice that you're starting to boost with some pedals in front of it, and it kind of starts to break up a little bit, no worries, because we're going into the next section, which is to have your amplifier set dirty with a little bit of crunch breakup. So if you just plugged your guitar straight into the amp, it's set a little dirty. And this is where your guitar volume is all the way up and you get a little bit of grit. It's a good crunchy rhythm sound. It could be a vintage amp that just breaks up when you turn it to a certain volume, or you could have an amp that has a master volume and a drive or distortion knob, and you can set the distortion kind of just for a little bit of breakup there. Again, watch the bass knob. The louder you go, the bass is going to need to be rolled back. What's the advantages of doing this, having your amplifier dirty? Well, the advantage is in how we're going to use it. We're going to go, this is kind of a push-pull setup. So we'll still push our amp for over-the-top drive. We've got our dirty rhythm sound already, just into the amp. We can use pedals to push that for our lead sound. But where's that clean sound? When we plug in and turn up, we get it clean. We don't have it clean. So what we're going to do is use our volume knob on the guitar. We'll roll that down to get a clean sound. We'll roll the volume that's on your guitar all the way up for that crunch sound. And then to go farther, to slam the front of the amp with that pedals to get our big gain or lead sound, or even just a big distorted rhythm sound. So let me go ahead and play a little bit of that so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've got the amp set up with a little grit. Our dirty rhythm sound. Right? Where do we go from here? Well, if we want clean, all we're going to do is roll that volume knob on the guitar back. There we go. Now, as I roll back up, it's a little dirtier. And then all the way up is our. Okay, but what if we wanted that lead tone? We could kick it up another notch with the drive pedal. I'm going to hit a tube screamer on top of, in front of this. Adds a little bit to it. Now I'm going to try a boost pedal in front of it. Let's hear what that sounds like. Adds a whole bunch of goodness to it. Okay, so those are the advantages of that. Who does this kind of stuff? Like Jimi Hendrix, Billy Gibbons, all tons of classic rock players. They do that, and you can hear it kind of had a classic rock sound. But what are the disadvantages to this setup? Hopefully, your amp will clean up when you roll down the volume. Usually, that's not a problem if you don't have it set up for a whole lot of gain. But some amps, you'd be surprised as you roll your volume pedal down, they still might sound a little too distorted. Another problem with this is sometimes when you hit this sound with a drive pedal, certain drive pedals can sound mushy and they don't mix well with the distortion you're getting from the amp. So you have to experiment to find the right kind of marriage between the drive pedal gain and the gain from the amplifier. Okay, the last situation is to have your amp already distorted at a nice, great lead sound. This is the exact opposite of the clean amp approach. You'll set your level for the highest you want it to be, the loudest you want it to be with your lead sound. And everything you do with this is letting off the gas, lowering your volume knob just back a bit for dirty rhythm, and then even farther for clean. So you've got everything you need just from your volume knob. You can always use pedals to get other tones, like a super saturated lead tone. But for most everything that you need, all you need to have is your volume knob. And I can't tell you how wonderful this is if you get it set up right, to not have to fool with anything. All you're doing all night is getting different tones by using the knobs on your guitar. What's the advantages of this? Well, this could be all you need. If you listen to AC/DC or the Allman Brothers, that's what they do. They have their amp set up where if you've got your guitar volume all the way up, that's their lead sound. They're good to go. But as you roll back, you get fantastic tones in different places as you roll the knob back. All sorts of in-between tones. So let me give you an example of this. So for this one, we're going to start all out. So if I turn my guitar volume all the way up, that's as heavy and as loud as I'm going to be. Okay, now what happens? That's my lead sound. I need those other two sounds. I need the dirty rhythm sound and I need the clean sound. So I'm going to start rolling back on the volume on my guitar. So that's to about 6 or 5. Notice that the level came down a little bit naturally from that. So it kind of puts that right where you want to be. It kind of fits in with the band a little bit more than the full out lead sound. Okay, so there's 2 of our sounds that we need. Or we've got our lead and our dirty rhythm. Now we need that clean sound. Let's see if we can get it. Now I'm at about 3 or 4. It's not perfectly clean, but it's clean enough. Okay, so I can go from clean to dirty rhythm. To lead. All that from just my rolling the volume knob back and forth on the guitar. It's a lot of fun, super simple. What are the disadvantages of that, though? Well, sometimes the raw amp sound that you have, it may not cut it. It may not sound exactly the way you would want to. Sometimes there won't be enough sustain from the sound that comes from the amp. So you might have to use pedals to shape the tone to get it the way you want. The other disadvantage is that your amp, when you've got it set so high and so distorted, it may not clean up enough as you roll your volume down. You notice this one, it wasn't pristine clean when I rolled down. Okay? So those are the 3 situations that you could find how to set up a single amp with a few pedals to get all the sounds you need. So let's talk about those pedals I used. One is none. You don't have to use a pedal at all if you get a great sound straight from your amplifier. The next you could use is a compressor. Now, a compressor, we've talked about it before. A compressor brings the loudest sounds down so that they match the low sounds. So whether you're playing loud or quiet, they all have kind of an even sound to them. I don't use a compressor a lot because a distorted amp kind of compresses anyway. But a compressor is a great sound to push a clean amp. So you can get a nice clean sound, but a little bit extra volume to it and a little bit extra sustains. You could talk about Dave Gilmour uses that. A lot of the country players use that. Mark Knopfler uses compressors. Trey from Fish uses compressors a lot. So you could try a compressor for that to get some of these different sounds. You could also try some different drive pedals. And we talked about overdrive pedals, like the Tube Screamer I used. And the settings on the Tube Screamer, you usually will use the drive knob, the one that gives a distortion, kind of low on that one, and use the output to push that a little bit more. It gives that Tube Screamer sound. You can also use a distortion pedal, and distortions, just set that to taste, and then add your level a little bit higher so that when it kicks on, you kind of, matching the band kind of pushes your bass sound a little bit. They've also got a lot of these pedals now, amp in a box pedals, where you just always leave it on. It turns your Fender amp into a Marshall or something like that, and they sound great too. You just use that just always on, and that is your core tone, and use other pedals to change. And boost pedals. And I really like boost pedals because it gives that added extra push, but it doesn't add a lot of, it kind of still sounds like your core tone, just more of it. Another great use for a boost pedal, have you ever noticed if you've plugged a Fender guitar into an amp and then switched to a humbucker guitar, a Les Paul or some sort of a Gibson humbucker type sound, that it's more distorted with the humbuckers than the Stratocaster. The single coil pickups, they don't have as much output. So what you could do is you could have a boost pedal there. When you switch to a single coil guitar, you could add a little boost with that so it matches the sound of your Les Paul, the level. So that way your core tone will stay the same whether you're using single coils or humbuckers. Pretty neat. It's fun to push an amp over the top to 11. It's one louder, isn't it? So the boost pedal will also add some thickening to your drive pedal before. You could put the boost pedal in front of your drive pedals or after your drive pedal. If you use it after that, it just basically makes it even louder. But if you do it before, it kind of thickens the drive and adds more sustain. So it's fun to play with different boost pedals. And we talked about the guitar. All the adjustments on your volume is basically what I talked about, but tone is important too, especially on the bridge pickup. If your bridge pickup doesn't have a tone knob, I suggest you mod it so it does, because it's perfect for the bridge pickup. A lot of, especially Strats, their bridge pickup is very ice picky. It's very shrill. So you can roll that tone down a little bit to take some of the high end off of that and get a really pleasing sound on your Stratocaster. Those knobs are right there. It's right by your fingers. You can make adjustments on the fly just by using your ears. Watch Warren Haynes or Derek Trucks. Throughout a night of music, they're constantly adjusting the settings on their guitars, and it sounds wonderful. You also have pickup selections on your guitars that have a huge impact on your tone. You see a lot of guys that just use the neck pickup all the time, but try that bridge pickup. It's awesome. There's a lot of great sounds that you have there. Okay, so today we went over the basic setup of one amp with a few pedals, or no pedals if your amp sounds that good, that kind of a rig. We chose our needed tones, and then we created our bass tone. We picked one of those as the bass tone with our amplifier. And the different methods we did that, we had the amplifier either set clean, or had the amplifier either set dirty, or had the amplifier set full out distorted. And then we talked about in each of those setups how to get those other tones that you need. We went over the pedals that will shape your tone further, and the guitar tone choices, and some adjustments that have to be made from venue to venue, especially with the bass knob on the amplifier. So my question for you today is, what's your setup? Do you do the single amp thing, or do you go more sophisticated? We would love to hear about it. So let us know in the show notes, www.playgguitarpodcast.com/030. This is listener feedback. This is where if you have a comment or a question I can help you with, I'll try my best to help you. To get in touch, you can always email me at feedback@playguitarpodcast.com. You can tweet at me at playguitarpdcst, or use the comments on the show notes page or the contact form on the site. Just plenty of ways to get in touch with me. So this week, I just want to talk a little bit about the Facebook group. We have a lot of new members already. Again, I would like to thank Timmy L, Harley G, Rahul S, Sergio P, Carlos V, Oho O, Gaz A, and Juan T. I apologize if I messed your name up there, but I just want to thank all of you for joining the group. We've been having a great time this week, talking a lot of gear. That's kind of how I wanted to get into this topic today, because there's been a lot of gear talk this week. We've been talking pickup replacements. Chris has got his Telly, sounded wonderful. We've been talking string gauges and different string brands that people like. We had a little tour of a guitar factory, some videos showing off each other's guitar playing. It has been a ton of fun, and I invite you to come join us in our Facebook group. It's really easy to get to. Just www.playguitargroup.com. That'll take you right to our Facebook group page, and you can sign up right there. Okay, so that's it for today. That's a wrap. I want to thank you for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show in iTunes or your podcast player. Or just tell someone about it. That would help too. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave an iTunes review for the show. If you're interested in online lessons, go on over to playguitaracademy.com and join my early adopter list to get news on the opening of the site and an early adopter discount. Also, follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at www.playguitarpodcast.com. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode.